long ago, before mortals walked the earth, and before the Olympian gods claimed their thrones on high Olympus, the world was a place of raw creation. The cosmos had only just begun to take shape from the vast emptiness that preceded all things. Chaos had given birth to the first beings, and from those ancient powers came the foundation of everything that would follow. Gaia arose first among these primordial forces, the earth herself, solid and vast, stretching in all directions. She was not merely a goddess who ruled over the land. She was the land itself, every mountain and valley, every plain and forest. Her body formed the ground beneath all things, and her presence brought stability to a universe that had known only formless void. From Gaia's own essence came her first children, born without the need for any other parent. Among these offspring was Pontus, the ancient sea. Pontus was the sea in its purest form, every wave and current, every drop of salt water that covered the earth. His waters lapped against Gaia's shores, and where they met, something new began to stir. Gaia and Pontus joined together, and from their union came the next generation of divine beings. These children would be different from Pontus himself. They would have consciousness and form, wisdom and purpose. They would serve as bridges between the raw elemental forces and the more refined deities who would eventually populate the heavens. The first child born to Gaia and Pontus was NEREUS. He emerged from the deep waters where his father's essence ran strongest, in the rich and fertile Aegean Sea. From the moment of his creation, NEREUS possessed qualities that set him apart from the mindless forces that had preceded him. He had awareness. He had knowledge. He had a form that could be perceived and a mind that could think. NEREUS took shape as a being of the sea. His lower body formed like a great fish tail, covered in silvery scales that caught what little light penetrated to the ocean depths. His upper body appeared as that of a powerful male figure, muscular and strong from swimming through the endless currents. Even from his earliest moments of existence, NEREUS bore the appearance of age. His face showed the wisdom of someone who had lived for countless years. Though he had only just come into being, the new god opened his eyes for the first time in the silent depths of the sea. All around him stretched his father's domain, dark waters that extended in every direction, lit only by strange luminescent creatures that drifted through the currents. Above him, far above, the surface of the water created a barrier between the sea and the sky. Below him, the ocean floor descended into trenches and valleys where no light had ever reached. NEREUS found that he understood his surroundings immediately. Knowledge came to him naturally, as though it had been woven into his very being at the moment of his creation. He knew the names of the creatures that swam past him. He understood the patterns of the tides and currents. He could sense the shape of the ocean floor beneath him and the location of every shore where water met land. But NEREUS's knowledge extended far beyond simple awareness of his environment. When he turned his mind to contemplate the nature of things, he found that he could perceive truths that no other being yet knew. He could see events that had already transpired, watching them unfold in his mind as clearly as if he had witnessed them himself. He could understand the present moment in all its complexity, knowing what occurred in distant parts of the world, and most remarkably, he could glimpse what was yet to come, shadows of future events that had not yet taken solid form. Nereus discovered another gift as he explored his new existence. When he focused his will, his body began to change. His fish tail split and reformed into the powerful tentacles of an octopus. He concentrated again, and those tentacles merged back together, reshaping themselves into the sleek form of a dolphin. Another thought, and he became a great whale. Then a darting fish. Then a drifting jellyfish. Then a form of pure water that had no solid shape at all. He changed into fire, flames that somehow burned even in the depths of the sea, hot and bright and consuming. He took on the forms of creatures that did not yet exist, trying out different shapes and sizes to see what his powers could accomplish. Eventually, he settled back into his original form, the fish-tailed god with the ancient face, and found that form suited him best. As Nereus grew accustomed to his existence, he felt something else stir in his nature. He possessed a deep sense of rightness, a feeling that guided him toward truth and justice. When he thought about speaking falsehoods, something within him recoiled. The idea of lying felt foreign and wrong, as though it contradicted his fundamental nature. He understood that he had been born as a being who could not lie, who would always speak truly even when truth might be difficult or inconvenient. Along with his truthfulness came a gentle temperament. Nereus felt no rage or fury, no desire to cause harm or destruction. The violent storms that his father Pontus could unleash held no appeal for him. Instead, Nereus found himself drawn to kindness and calm wisdom. He wanted to help rather than hinder, to nurture rather than destroy. He embodied the sea's bounty rather than its dangers, the rich schools of fish that fed entire communities, the calm waters that allowed safe passage, the gentle waves that lapped peacefully at sandy shores. After Nereus came his siblings, each born from the continued union of Pontus and Gaia. Thaumas arrived next, taking his place among the ancient sea gods. Then came Phorcys, who would rule over the hidden dangers of the deep. Sita followed, a goddess of sea monsters and creatures of terror. Finally came Eurybia, whose power and might matched that of her brothers. The young god explored his father's realm, swimming through the vast Aegean Sea that would become his primary domain. He descended to the deepest trenches and rose to just beneath the surface, feeling the warmth of the sun filtering down through the water. He investigated every underwater cave and grotto, searching for a place that felt right, a home where he could settle and make his dwelling. Nereus found what he sought in a silver cave far beneath the waves, a place where the water ran clear and clean, where fish gathered in great abundance. The cave had multiple chambers, spacious and comfortable, with smooth stone walls and floors covered in soft sand. Here, Nereus decided he would make his home. Nereus spent his early days exploring the vast waters that his father embodied. He left his silver cave and swam through the Aegean, moving from one end of the sea to the other, observing everything he encountered. Each journey taught him something new about the realm he inhabited. He descended to the deepest parts of the ocean, where he found strange fish that had never seen sunlight, their bodies transparent or glowing with cold light. He watched them hunt and feed, learning their patterns. He discovered volcanic vents on the sea floor where hot water poured out, creating columns of warmth in the freezing depths. Around these vents, life clustered creatures that fed on the minerals and heat rather than on sunlight from above. Nereus rose to the shallower waters near the coasts, where sunlight penetrated and turned the sea a brilliant blue. Here, different fish swam bright and colorful, darting among rocks and coral formations. He observed how they spawned, laying eggs in protected crevices. He watched predators hunt their prey, noting which species thrived and which struggled. He began to understand that he was not just a god of the sea, but specifically a god of the fish, the countless varieties that filled the waters with life. His prophetic sight required practice to control. At first, visions came to him unbidden flashes of future events that interrupted his thoughts without warning. Looking into the past proved easier. Nereus could turn his attention backward and watch the formation of the world itself. He saw his mother Gaia emerge from the void, solid and immense. He witnessed his father Pontus spreading across the earth's surface, filling every basin and depression with salt water. He observed the birth of his siblings, seeing the moments of their creation as clearly as if he had been present for each one. His shape-shifting abilities also required refinement. He had discovered he could change forms, but now he practiced controlling the transformations with precision. He learned to shift only part of his body while keeping the rest unchanged. He could make his arms become octopus tentacles while his tail remained fish-like. He could grow fins where he wanted them, shrink or expand his size, alter his coloring to match his surroundings. One of the most amazing aspects of Nereus was that he could only tell the truth, so much so that beings began to seek him out. The first to approach him was one of his brothers, Thomas, who came with a question about currents in the western seas. Thomas had observed ships struggling in certain waters and wanted to understand why. Nereus sat in his cave and examined the question. He could have given a simple answer, but something in his nature compelled him to provide complete truth. He explained to Thomas exactly how the currents moved, where they originated, when they would shift with the seasons, and which areas would remain dangerous for vessels. Thomas thanked him and departed. Among the beings Nereus observed during his explorations was Doris, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. She lived in the places where her father's fresh waters flowed into the salt waters of Pontus, river mouths, estuaries, and coastal springs, where two types of water mixed. Nereus first saw her at the mouth of a river that emptied into the Aegean. He watched her for several days before approaching. She tended to the creatures that lived in the brackish waters and worked with the same care he gave to his own charges in the deeper sea. When Nereus finally approached her, Doris showed no fear. She had heard of the old man of the sea and his reputation for truthfulness and gentle nature. She asked him what brought him to the river mouth, so far from his usual deep-water home. Nereus told her he had been observing her work with the estuarine creatures. He explained that he had questions about how fresh water species differed from saltwater ones, and thought she might have answers. Doris responded with detailed knowledge of the fish and plants under her care, describing their habits and needs. They met again the next day and the day after. Nereus would leave his silver cave and swim to where Doris worked. They discussed the creatures they each tended. She told him about the rivers and streams of the world, about rainfall and mountain springs. He shared his knowledge of ocean currents and deep-sea life. Weeks passed. Their conversations expanded beyond marine biology. Nereus realized he looked forward to these meetings. When he returned to his cave each evening, it felt emptier than before. He used his prophetic sight to examine potential futures, and saw one where Doris joined him in the Aegean depths as his wife. He asked her directly if she would marry him. Doris considered the question seriously. She would need to leave the river mouths where she had always lived and make her home in the deeper salt waters of his domain. But she had grown fond of Nereus and respected his wisdom and honesty. Doris agreed. They were married in the depths of the Aegean, with both freshwater and saltwater deities attending the ceremony, and Doris moved into Nereus's silver cave. Doris soon became pregnant and gave birth to a girl they named Ploto. More daughters followed. Every few months, Doris delivered another child. Each birth brought another girl into the world. The second was Eucronte, then came Sal, then Amphitrite, then Eudora. The cave that had housed only Nereus, then Nereus and Doris, began to fill with young voices and movement. The daughters grew quickly, as divine children do. They swam through the Aegean waters with their parents, learning about the sea from Nereus and about the mixing of waters from Doris. Each girl developed her own personality and interests. Some preferred the deep waters where their father spent most of his time. Others liked the shallower areas near the coasts where sunlight penetrated. Then Thetis was born, then Galen, then Glauc. The births continued year after year. Chimatho arrived, then Spale, then Tho, then Haley. Nereus kept count of each daughter, remembering every name, every birth, every first swim through the open water. The cave became too small for the growing family. Nereus and Doris found a larger complex of underwater caverns nearby, with multiple chambers where the girls could sleep and play. The family moved to these new quarters, and still the daughters kept coming. Then Pasithea was born, then Erido, then Eunice, then Melite. The girls formed groups among themselves, clustering with sisters close to their own age. The older ones helped care for the younger ones, teaching them to swim properly and showing them which sea creatures were safe to approach. Eulimene arrived, then Agau, then Dynamene, then Same. Each daughter inherited some of their father's gifts and their mother's nature. Nereus taught them about the sea's bounty. After a while, Dodo was born, then Proto, then Pharusa, then Callianassa. The family expanded until 30 daughters swam through the Aegean, then 40, then 45. Finally, the 50th daughter was born, Nereus, and Doris named her Nemerts. With her birth, the family had 50 daughters, each beautiful and graceful, each embodying some aspect of the sea's nature. The daughters became known collectively as the Nereids. Sailors who passed over the waters where they lived sometimes caught glimpses of them, lovely female figures swimming beneath the surface, their hair streaming behind them in the current, their movements fluid and swift. The Nereids became associated with safe passage and good fortune at sea. Mariners believed that seeing one meant the waters would be calm and the journey successful. Years later, Doris became pregnant one final time. She gave birth to a son, the first and only male child of their union. They named him Nereius. Nereius stood out among his sisters for his striking beauty, which drew the notice of both deities and sea creatures throughout the Aegean. Nereius spent his early days with his sisters, swimming through the same underwater caverns and learning from Nereus and Doris. He became fast and skilled at moving through currents, showing a natural gift for adjusting to the ever-changing motion of the sea. Nereus observed the boy's talents and taught him about the responsibilities that came with being a child of the old man of the sea. Stories about Nereius reached the ears of both gods and goddesses. According to one tale, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was captivated by Nereius before she rose from the sea to join the Olympians. She wanted him to leave the undersea home of Nereus and travel with her to Olympus. Nereius refused Aphrodite's request because he preferred to stay with his family in the sea. In anger, Aphrodite transformed Nereius into a sea creature. Accounts differ, but many say she changed him into a shellfish. She gave wings intended for Nereius to her son Eros instead. Another story described how Poseidon noticed Nereius' beauty and affection. Poseidon was so impressed that he made Nereius his charioteer, and the boy drove the god's sea chariot at astonishing speeds, which amazed all who witnessed the event. Some versions of the tale say that Helios, the sun god, grew jealous of Nereius' skill and transformed him into a shellfish, wishing to put an end to the admiration Nereius drew from Poseidon and the sea creatures who followed his swift chariot. The sisters of Nereius, the Nereids, felt the loss of their brother deeply when he vanished from his human form. They pleaded with Poseidon to restore him, and in some accounts, Nereius remained companion to Poseidon beneath the waves, but in the form of a sea creature rather than a human-looking god, as a wise god Nereus had grown accustomed to those who sought his counsel, coming to him with with respect and offerings. Fishermen prayed at the shore. Merchants poured wine into the sea. Families seeking guidance brought honey and oil. But one day, someone came seeking his knowledge who had no intention of asking politely. Heracles, son of Zeus and Alcmene, had been commanded to perform 12 labors for King Eurystheus of Mycenae as penance for killing his wife and children during a madness sent by Hera. For his 11th labor, King Eurystheus commanded Heracles to bring him 3 golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. These golden apples grew on a tree that Gaia had given to Hera as a wedding gift, and they were kept in a garden at the far western edge of the world. The garden was tended by the Hesperides, nymphs of the evening, and guarded by Ladon, a serpent dragon with 100 heads. Heracles faced a problem that strength could not solve. He did not know where the garden of the Hesperides was located. The garden existed somewhere at the edge of the known world, but its exact location remained unknown to most mortals, and even some immortals. He learned that Nereus, the old man of the sea, possessed this knowledge. The ancient sea god knew the location of all places, past, present, and future. So, on this day, Heracles found Nereus sleeping on the rocks. He took hold of the sleeping god and bound him fast. Nereus woke to find himself in the grip of Zeus's son. Rather than answer the demigod's demand for information, Nereus began changing himself into all sorts of shapes. He shifted from one form to another, trying to escape Heracles' grasp through transformation. Heracles did not let him loose. No matter what shape Nereus took, the demigod held on. The wrestling match continued as Nereus cycled through transformation after transformation, and Heracles refused to release him. Finally, Nereus told him where the golden apples and the Hesperides were. He informed Heracles that he had already come very close to the Hesperides when he had sailed to the island of Erythea to steal Geryon's cattle during his 10th labor. Armed with this information about the location, Heracles released Nereus and set out to complete his task. Heracles journeyed through the Libyan desert again, eventually reaching the Caucasus Mountains, where he freed Prometheus from his chains. The grateful Titan advised Heracles not to retrieve the apples himself, but instead to ask Atlas to fetch them. Atlas, who held up the sky as punishment from Zeus, was on friendly terms with the Hesperides and could enter the garden without difficulty. Heracles found Atlas at the western edge of the Libyan desert and asked for his help. Atlas agreed to fetch the apples if Heracles would temporarily hold up the sky in his place. Heracles accepted, and Atlas went to the garden and returned with 3 golden apples. When Atlas returned with the apples, he refused to take back the burden of the sky. Heracles tricked him, asking Atlas to hold the sky for just a moment while he adjusted a cushion on his shoulders. Atlas took back the weight, and Heracles immediately grabbed the apples and left, completing his 11th labor. Through the years, the Nereids grew into beautiful young goddesses, each with her own nature and powers. Amphitrite, the eldest, had inherited much of her father's calm temperament and and her mother's grace. She possessed the ability to still winds and calm rough seas, a gift she shared with her sisters Chimatol and Chimadoc. Amphitrite caught the attention of Poseidon. She was the eldest, the most graceful, moving with an authority that set her apart from her sisters. He saw her dancing one day among the Nereids and came directly to Amphitrite and asked her to be his wife. The offer shocked her. She knew Poseidon's reputation, his violent temper, his rage that could summon earthquakes and shipwrecks, his tempestuous nature that made him feared throughout the seas. Amphitrite refused. Poseidon insisted. He was the king of all the seas now, the powerful Olympian who had overthrown the Titans. What better match could exist than between the god who ruled the ocean and the daughter of the ancient sea god NEREUS? She would become queen of the entire sea. Amphitrite refused again. She had no desire to give up her freedom to marry a god known for his violent moods. She wanted to remain with her sisters, dancing in the waves, helping sailors through storms, living peacefully in the Aegean depths. When Poseidon would not accept her refusal, Amphitrite fled. She left Naxos and swam west, away from the Aegean, away from her father's domain. She traveled to the far end of the Mediterranean, to where the Titan Atlas held up the sky. There, in the Atlas Mountains, she hid herself. Poseidon searched for her. He sent sea creatures throughout the Mediterranean asking if anyone had seen the Nereid. He sent his servants to scour the ocean, but Amphitrite had hidden herself well, and the sea was vast. Finally, Poseidon called upon Delphinus, a dolphin who could swim deeper and faster than any other creature in the sea. Delphinus could reach places even Poseidon could not easily access. The god commanded the dolphin to find Amphitrite and bring her back. Delphinus searched until he found where Amphitrite had concealed herself near Atlas. The dolphin did not try to force her to return. Instead, Delphinus spoke to her gently, arguing that she should reconsider Poseidon's offer. The dolphin pointed out that as Poseidon's wife, she could temper his violent nature. The sea and all its creatures needed someone with her calming powers to balance the storm god's rage. She could protect sailors, fish, and all sea life from Poseidon's worst impulses if she stood beside him as queen. Amphitrite listened to the dolphin's reasoning. The argument made sense. Poseidon ruled the seas whether she married him or not. If she became his wife, she might be able to moderate his anger and protect the ocean's creatures from his wrath. She agreed to return with Delphinus. The dolphin brought Amphitrite back across the Mediterranean to where Poseidon waited. The god was so grateful to Delphinus for persuading her that he placed the dolphin among the stars, creating the constellation Delphinus to honor the creature who had secured his marriage. Amphitrite married Poseidon and became queen of the sea. The wedding was attended by both Olympian gods and the ancient sea deities. The marriage transformed Amphitrite's status. She was no longer simply a Nereid dancing in the Aegean. She became the female personification of the sea itself, inseparable from her husband's domain. Amphitrite bore Poseidon several children. Their son Triton became the herald of the sea, blowing his conch shell horn to calm or raise the waves. They had daughters, two Rhodos, after whom the island of Rhodes was named, Benthesicyme, who lived in Ethiopia and Cymopolia. As queen, Amphitrite wielded power over the sea's creatures. She became known as the mother of seals, dolphins, and fish. Sailors prayed to her for safe passage, believing she could use her calming influence to still dangerous waters and protect them from Poseidon's wrath. Other Nereids also left their father's home to pursue their own destinies. Galatea caught the eye of the Cyclops Polyphemus, though she loved the mortal Acis instead. Same bore a son to Aeacus. Many of the 50 daughters married river gods or minor sea deities, spreading Nereus's bloodline throughout the waters of the Greek world. Thetis, one of Nereus's 50 daughters, grew to become the most beautiful of all the Nereids. Her beauty and grace caught the attention of Zeus, king of the gods, and Poseidon, lord of the sea. Both desired to marry her. Prometheus, the Titan, knew a dangerous prophecy about Thetis. He warned Zeus that any son born to Thetis would be greater than his father. Zeus immediately withdrew his pursuit. He had overthrown his own father Cronos and taken power over the cosmos. He had no intention of being overthrown in turn by a son born from Thetis. Poseidon likewise abandoned his courtship when he learned of the prophecy. The Olympians decided that Thetis must marry a mortal man instead. If her son had a mortal father, the boy would be mortal himself and pose no threat to Zeus's rule. The gods selected Peleus, king of Phthia and son of Aeacus, to be Thetis's husband. Peleus was the noblest mortal alive and had earned favor with the gods through his piety and heroism. Thetis did not want to marry a mortal. She resisted the marriage and fled when Peleus tried to approach her. The centaur Chiron advised Peleus on how to capture the reluctant Nereid. He must grab hold of her and not let go, no matter what happened. Peleus found Thetis and seized her. Like her father Nereus when Heracles had grabbed him, Thetis began shape-shifting to escape. She transformed into fire, burning in Peleus's arms. She became water, flowing and liquid. She shifted into a lion, then other wild beasts. Peleus held on through every transformation. Finally, Thetis returned to her original form and consented to the marriage. The wedding took place on Mount Pelion, outside Chiron's cave. All the gods and goddesses attended the ceremony. Apollo played his lyre while the muses sang. Chiron gave Peleus a wedding gift, an ashen spear polished by Athena with a blade forged by Hephaestus. The gods feasted and sang hymns in honor of the marriage. Only one deity was not invited, Eris, goddess of discord. Angered at being excluded, Eris threw a golden apple into the celebration, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." This apple would eventually lead to the judgment of Paris, the abduction of Helen, and the Trojan War, Thetis gave birth to a son named Achilles. Through him, Nereus became grandfather to the child who would become the greatest warrior of his generation. Thetis tried to make her son immortal. She anointed Achilles with ambrosia and held him in fire to burn away his mortal parts. Peleus saw his wife apparently trying to kill their child and shouted in anger. Thetis dropped Achilles and fled back to the sea, returning to her father's realm. Another prophecy hung over Achilles. He would either live a long but unremarkable life, or a short life filled with glory. When war came to Troy years later, Thetis warned Achilles that if he went to Troy, he would win eternal fame but die young. If he stayed home, he would live to old age but be forgotten. Achilles chose glory. He went to Troy and became the Achaeans' greatest warrior. Thetis did what she could to protect her son during the war. She convinced Hephaestus to forge divine armor for Achilles to replace the armor that Hector had stripped from Patroclus's body. She interceded with Zeus on Achilles' behalf when he quarreled with Agamemnon. She warned him that death would follow soon after he killed the Trojan champions Hector and Memnon. Achilles ignored his mother's warnings. He killed Hector and dragged his body behind his chariot. He killed Memnon, son of Eos, the dawn goddess. Then, as Thetis had prophesied, Achilles died at the gates of Troy, struck down by an arrow from Paris's bow guided by Apollo. Thetis returned to Troy to mourn her son. She led the Nereids in funeral laments for Achilles, her sisters rising from the sea to weep for their nephew. Through Achilles, Nereus's bloodline had touched one of the greatest events, destroyed mighty Troy, and killed heroes on both sides. Over the years, Nereus remained in the Aegean. In the Laconian town of Gythium, people built shrines to an old man and made offerings before voyages. Fishermen still called on Nereus when their nets came up empty. Sailors still invoked his name when storms threatened their ships. Alexander the Great stood on the Syrian shore before the Battle of Issus and prayed to Nereus. Poets wrote of him. Artists painted him on vases, fish-tailed, ancient-faced, holding his wooden staff. Homer praised his wisdom and truthfulness in his verses. But Nereus did not seek worship or demand temples. He simply existed. Ages passed. Heroes died. Cities rose and fell. Wars ravaged Greece. Through it all, Nereus endured in the Aegean with Doris. Thank you for spending these hours with me, listening to the story of a god most people have forgotten. I hope you found something worth keeping in his story, whether that's respect for the old truths, wonder at how deep these myths run, or just a few hours of peace before sleep. Good night. Rest well. I'll be here when you're ready for the next story. Would you like us to visit Poseidon or Achilles next?